Okay, yeah, we're here today. We're doing Ask An Afrikan. I'm here with my brother Haqi.
Haqi.
Please introduce yourself for the camera, brother.
Yo, my attributes are HaqielZodeq. That's truth from the source. Zodeq is righteousness or right reasoning. Atanakanduro, that means I mastered the serpent's medicine, and I tore a pen, which means I'm always ready to shoot. So I'm always aware, I'm always at my right level. Those are my attributes, those are names I go by. Y'all can call me Haq, or you can call me Haqi.
My man.
You know, I like to say makaru to the ancestors, and let's do this.
Let's do it. Oh, yo, man, I'm powerful introduction. I'm glad to be here today.
Cool.
Like I said, I've been wanting to interview you for a minute. One brother I do actually look up to. You always share a lot of wisdom. Yeah. As we just now, before the camera cut on, you was giving me some good wisdom, so I appreciate it. To start off, where you from, brother?
I'm from Rochester, New York, upstate New York, between Buffalo and Syracuse. The part of New York, you know, there's only one New York for everybody else in the country, but that's the part of the New York where, you know, a lot of things go down Buffalo, Syracuse area. So we're right in the middle between Buffalo and Syracuse.
Okay, and how was it coming up in Buffalo and Syracuse? Because that's true, you really only hear about like Manhattan and Long Island.
So Rochester, so Buffalo, Syracuse, Rochester are pretty much like an hour 45 minutes between each other at the top in the Great Lakes area. So Rochester is in the middle, and Rochester is right on Lake Ontario. So right across from Lake Ontario is Canada. So that's how far up we are. I mean, you know, anybody from New York who's done any real traveling, street, you know, most of us know street shit. Anybody from New York who's done any real traveling, any street traveling, knows that New York, Buffalo, and shit like that ain't really to be fucked with. Right now, you know, Buffalo is blowing up because hip hop wise, you know, Benny them are doing things, but we've been doing all that for years. You know, upstate. You know, I rhymed back in the 80s and 90s, and we always been that hard. The way they are. Like literally, the way that they are is who we are upstate. You know, street dudes, you know, the ghetto we come from or the unity we come from, that's the way we are. That street level, that high mindset. So if you listen to the Benny the Butcher and all them dudes in the machine right now, you understand that's Rochester, that's Buffalo, that's Syracuse. They're dudes who did that before. My man Sonny was on 106 in Park. Back in the day, he won the Freestyle Fridays, he won them all. He from Rochester. He was on So Def, and he got something called Hustler, the Hustler's Way, or Hustler Ambition. I'm sorry, son, if I'm getting the title wrong, but we'll hook it up later. But that's who we are up there, man. So it's just as rough as anywhere else, probably even rougher, because you know when everybody think you from Manhattan and Brooklyn and the Bronx, and you're not. You know, you walk around with a chip on your shoulder. So we don't fuck around with people, period, because you never know what you're gonna get up there, man. You gotta be careful, because you know there are people who don't have the right mindset everywhere you go. But if you got a mindset where the whole world thinks you nothing or you think you country, then you know that country can fall down on your ass. Just like when you go down south. You go down south in New York and you end up in Memphis somewhere, fuck around with some of them country boys. The country boy leave your ass in the field.
Facts.
Right. So that's how it is upstate. You know what I'm saying? When you tell people you from Rochester, they go, "Oh, you from Brooklyn? You've been to Manhattan? You've been to Harlem?" And there, most of us have been, but that's still 6 hours away. That's a long drive. You know what I'm saying?
World.
Whole different world. Partially, whole different mindset, definitely, but still New York. You know what I'm saying? If we're in Charlotte, that New York come out. You know what I'm saying? So it's all the same. You know, I grew up just like everybody else grew up. You know, I grew up in the 90s. I was off the porch, out the house in the 80s, so I played in the park. I played outside, you know, right before computers. We had Nintendo and Atari and all that shit, but we still played outside. And that's how, you know, we became street kids, because we was already outside when the crack hit. And, you know, that's just a natural progression, man. It's the same. It happens the same. For us, it happened the same as it happened in New York with projects and shit like that, because we had small projects, we had all of that, but the development was the same, because same way it happened in South Central, wherever it originates, that's a different development than when it hits the Midwest and things of that nature. You know, Chicago, LA, or South Central, whatever area it started out there, New York, all that shit is different depending on where you grow up is different from Pittsburgh and from, you know, other places that are a little they catch up a little late. So it was the same for us, man. Street level.
Okay, thank you. And you said 80s. So how was the 80s before crack? Cause you know you brought that up. So I'm curious.
So where I grew up, man, we played outside. Like I said, we played outside. Like my mother let us out. You know, all the cliches are true, man. You had to be in before the street lights, you know what I'm saying? But you was out early, like 6, 7 in the morning, you gone.
Wow.
And you didn't really come home. You know, when I was young, so in the 80s I was 10. When I was that young, my mother would be like, you know, you got to stay on the street. But when you got bikes and, you know, everybody got bikes, you know, you don't really stay on the street. You ride your bike wherever you can get to, and you just try to get home before lunch. Then when you get a little bit older, 11, 12, I grew up in, like I said, it is a little bit different. We had trees and yards. So we went outside and didn't come home because we would climb cherry trees. We had apricots, apples, pears that grew in Rochester. We had berry bushes that grew, and we knew how to eat that. We would eat all of it and not be hungry, so we didn't really have to go home. That's the way I looked at it in my childhood. My mother would probably be like, nah, you was home. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I looked at it like, nah, we was gone all day long, every day. So it was a balanced, and plus, man, it was also, for me, it was a balanced kind of balance. You know, my mom was had 2 boys, single mother, and she's from Florida, but she's from a strict Florida. Like, we didn't run amok. My mother would be there. We did things so that she would know certain things, like we were supposed to stay in the house. There was no babysitters back then. You know, you had to stay in the house. We were in the house from the youngest age I can remember. We just had to stay inside. You couldn't answer the phone. There was only one phone. My mother had to call 3 times, hang up, and then you answer. That's how you know it's her, right? Or what we did was get the long cord, because, you know, they didn't have phones where you could walk around, so your parents bought extension cords for the phone. So she had a long phone. That was before they had cordless phones. So we would take that one phone and string it outside.
Wow.
And everybody be outside playing on the street. And if the phone rang, your friends would be like, yo, your phone rang. And everybody had to be quiet, and you run in the house and you know, what y'all doing? But your parents knew you were outside. Because what I learned later is people on the street knew that y'all was outside, right? And the parents like, yeah, your kid's outside, phone outside. Your mother knew you was outside, right. But she knew you was safe because people was looking out for you, and she knew you was staying on the street for the most part. So, you know, you didn't really get in that much trouble. But she knew. I knew she knew. You know what I'm saying? Because we was always, that phone would be ringing. There was no call waiting early 80s either. That was something you had to pay for later. So that phone could ring forever. So somebody had to be like, yo, the phone ring. You got to run down the street. Your mother was like, why the phone ring so long? You got to lie about what you was doing, man. But, okay. We were street kids, man. It was, I don't know if it was as good as the 70s. I think in the 70s, they pretty much just roamed wherever. I mean, 60s, 70s, if you really think about it historically, and where black people lived in those times, you could pretty much go anywhere as a kid because everyone knew you. Even in the cities, I think. You know, I know that in Harlem, you could probably go anywhere in Harlem because people still knew you. I went to school in the 80s in Pittsburgh. And in Pittsburgh, they had a district called the Hill District. And they did a little PBS documentary on it. I watched it. It looked just like Harlem. That's the first instance I got that there was other places that were like Harlem all over the place where black people existed. Not just Tulsa, not just, you know, Wilmington, but everywhere.
Do you think that's something, because what you're describing, it says like communities, black communities.
Black-owned communities.
Right.
Because we talk a lot about economics right now. So they were black-owned. Do
you think that's something that we kind of have lost today?
Man, that's gone, yeah. Ain't no black communities, man. Integration killed that.
Yeah, because, you know, even...
Now, there are black communities that don't include all of blackness. I know that there's a place called DeSoto, Texas, where some of the richest black people in Texas live at. DeSoto is 70% owned by black people, and they're all wealthy. There's a place right outside of Atlanta called Stonecrest. Right now, Stonecrest was just incorporated maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Really? It was when we went and talked to the mayor there, that land, that Stonecrest, was donated by one black man. 70% of Stonecrest was donated by one black man. Now, I don't know the name of the area that Stonecrest was, but it's right outside of Atlanta. And if you talk to people who grew up in Atlanta, they'll tell you that they grew up there. It was I do remember somebody telling me there was the place where the first mall was built in Atlanta. So I can't remember the name of that outside area, but that's where Stonecrest is. And Stonecrest is wealthy. When we went and talked to the mayor, Wesley Snipes had just been there like a couple days before us.
Oh, wow.
Because wealthy people wanted to live in that area. They wanted to build a community of wealth. Now that means that the community doesn't include everybody. Mm-hmm. And for us to have a real community, you got to have a community of levels. It has to have people at every level. Right. Because if it doesn't, then you have to bring people in to do work and stuff like that. And you know better than white folks, busting in workers to do X, Y, Z, and not really having a community. So communities are gone in that sense, but there are still some places where black people exist, and they exist with Rotary clubs and all that shit that white people exist in, and they wealthy. They go to live in those areas so they can stay away from everybody.
Well, let me ask you this. In your words or in your eyes, what does it take to have a community?
You have to be a nation builder. A community is a nation. Period. If you don't recognize that, then you're not really thinking community. So what does that mean? That means that it's food, clothing, shelter, transportation, and communication. Now, that communication is a big thing. That's one fist. And then what is it? It's tribe, clan. It's your wife, your children, and then yourself. That's your thought process. That's two fists. So as long as you can get with that, you can do anything.
Right. And
that's a nation.
So it sounds like it starts with just with family.
Yeah, everything starts with family, man. That's why Chancellor Williams' Destruction of Black Civilization is really one of the best books ever written. Is the best book ever written because Chancellor walked the path that he knew to walk at the time to find out the information that he wanted to find out. So he had to go to Africa and speak to elders and tribal members and tribal historians and learn what they knew about the Urugu. You know what I'm saying? And how they came into being and what happened. And once you learn that shit, you recognize that it's humanity at a level. So what does Destruction of Black Civilization say? Destruction of Black Civilization says that every time that black people decided not to interact with white people, they stayed in power longer. Period. That's it. That's all it is. And what does that mean? That means that black people autonomously had a culture and a power that was elongated as long as they kept to themselves. Mm-hmm. All right. And then how did that destroy itself? Well, they did it through the way anybody does things. Through first trade and friendship and interaction. And then you break down that trade, and then you go into commingling and mixing. Once you commingle and mix, then you have dual loyalty. Once you have dual loyalty, you at the precipice already right there, because you got to make a distinction between such and such. Like sometimes I hear mixed people talking, like Shaka Bars. We all know Shaka Bars. Shaka Bars is mixed. Mm-hmm. His mother is white, but that brother talk like his mother ain't white.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm saying? He talked like white people was fucking shit up, but his mother's white. So there's a distinction that he made in himself. Him and his sister have made, them the only two I really follow, but him specifically, even though he still hangs out with his mother and all kind of shit, I've seen him, talk about her, but he's made a mental distinction within himself that I ain't with that shit. I ain't with that white shit. These white people ain't right. Now, how does that carry out in his everyday life? Do we know what he's doing every day to say to them X, Y, and Z? We don't know. So because we don't know, there's a level of dual loyalty that can come into play that you have to be aware of. Right. And if you're not aware of that, then you end up like the brothers in Destruction of Black Civilization. You end up like, oh well, these are my kids, and here's the thing. Once you have kids and extended grandkids and stuff like that, if you're not aware historically, and most of our people are historically ignorant, and history has to be one of the most important things that we have to start to teach.
Facts.
And not just history, but history of thought process. Like how people lived in history. It's one thing to say, hey, this, and this happened in history. It's another thing to say it happened because their thought process led to this. If we don't get there, then you can't really look at historical figures as actual people.
Right.
You look at them as, superheroes. If they're not actual people, then how can you be them? Yeah. So for me, you got to look at it historically. You got to be aware of who a person is and what might happen because of who they are and what they say they are and all of those things. So once that mixing starts, then here is the thing. If you mix and there's a balance, then you don't get the problems. There's a lot of mixed people that you may not have any problem out of, ever. They cool and balanced on both sides of their family, because both of the sides of their family is balanced and okay. They ain't extreme sociopaths. They're not extreme black power. They just okay in the middle. Right. So those little mixed people, they don't understand any of this conversation about mixed people, because they come from white people who are okay, or they come from so mixed a family that when they go to family reunions, they got white people and Asian people and black people and Hispanic people, and everybody in their family is a little bit beige.
Right, right.
So they like, man, we don't understand none of that shit. But we're talking about the beginnings of things. And we're also talking about power. That's all I'm always talking about. So for me, I'm always talking about power, and that power has to be you at your people level. So that